Villain or saint? Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the man who weaponized faith despite being a secularist, plunging millions into a bloodbath just to forge an empire from the ruins. You will never look at South Asian history the same way again after learning this truth. History is often forged in irony, and perhaps no single figure from the 20th century embodies this more completely than Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the man who would one day be revered as the Quaid-e-Azam. The great leader and father of Pakistan began his political life as the very antithesis of religious nationalism. He was a secular, London-trained lawyer, a product of the British legal tradition at Lincoln's Inn. Known for his impeccable Savile Row suits, his clipped English accent, his clean-shaven face, and his noted disdain for the outwardly pious, he was, in the truest sense, a British Indian Pukka Sahib, a man who found his intellectual and cultural home in the drawing rooms and courtrooms of London and Bombay. Far removed from the religious fervor of the masses, his personal habits and his political upbringing were rooted in a secular, constitutional tradition that viewed religious communalism as a backward step. Yet this same brilliant, fastidious, and intensely rational man would, in the final, desperate decade of the British Raj, harness the most potent and emotional force available to him, religion, to achieve a political goal. He would wield the specter of Islamic separatism with such unyielding determination that he ultimately forced the division of a continent, a seismic event that redrew the map of South Asia created to new nations, and unleashed a torrent of human suffering that echoes to this day. The destiny he shaped was not only for the millions who found themselves in a new country called Pakistan, but also for the millions in India who saw their nation vivisected, and for the entire geopolitical balance of the world. Jinnah's own life, a journey from arch-nationalist to arch-separatist, is the central, tragic paradox at the heart of one of modern history's most painful and contested legacies. This is the kind of complex, contradictory history that we are dedicated to exploring on this channel. These stories are not simple, and the figures who shape them are rarely just heroes or villains. If you believe, as we do, that understanding this complex past is crucial for understanding our present, we ask for your support. Please take a moment to click the like button beneath this video. It's a small click for you, but it massively helps the algorithm show this documentary to more people who are eager to learn. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. This ensures you won't miss our future deep dives into the events and personalities that shaped our world. And finally, if you find this story compelling or important, please share it with a friend, a family member, or on your social media. Every share builds our community of curious minds and allows us to continue producing the high-quality, in-depth historical content you deserve. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. In the early, hopeful days of the Indian independence movement, Jinnah was a towering figure within the mainstream, and his arena was the Indian National Congress, the dominant political body advocating for home rule. He joined in 1906, bringing with him a formidable intellect and a reputation as one of India's most brilliant barristers. He was a protege of the moderate leader Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who famously expressed his admiration by stating that Jinnah has true stuff in him, and that freedom from all sectarian prejudice, which will make him the best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. This praise was immortalized by Sarojini Naidu, who adopted the title for her biography of him. Jinnah's commitment was not merely rhetorical. He poured his legal and political acumen into bridging the divide between the two major religious communities, seeing a united front as the only practical way to extract concessions from the British. His crowning achievement in this era was the 1916 Lucknow Pact. This was a political masterstroke, an agreement he personally brokered between the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League, the very organization he would one day lead down a different path. The pact established a set of joint demands, including a more representative legislature, and, crucially, Congress agreed to the principle of separate electorates for Muslims. This was a huge concession, establishing a framework for minority rights that Jinnah believed was essential. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that Jinnah's vision had prevailed, that India's two great communities could march in lockstep toward a shared destiny of self-rule. He was, by all accounts, the architect of this unity, a rational modernizer who believed India's future lay in secular, constitutional democracy. This era of unity, however, was not destined to last. The political landscape of India was irrevocably altered by the arrival of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who returned from South Africa with a new, radical political methodology, satyagraha, or nonviolent civil disobedience. For Jinnah, the meticulous constitutionalist, Gandhi's approach was anathema. He saw it as populist, mystical, and dangerously extra-constitutional, a formula for anarchy and mob rule rather than ordered, legal progress. He was appalled by Gandhi's mixing of religion and politics, particularly the Khilafat movement, which he felt would unleash primitive forces he could not control. The 1920 Nagpur session of Congress was the breaking point. Jinnah, openly dissenting against Gandhi's plan, was shouted down and marginalized. This professional isolation was compounded by a growing political disillusionment. The final straw came with the 1928 Nehru Report, a proposed constitution for an independent India drafted by a committee led by Motilal Nehru. The report, to Jinnah's horror, explicitly rejected the principle of separate electorates for Muslims, the very cornerstone of the Lucknow Pact he had worked so tirelessly to build. He felt profoundly betrayed, convinced that the Congress, under Gandhi's Hindu-dominated influence, was incapable of protecting Muslim minority interests. His proposed amendments, a last-ditch effort to salvage the situation, were dismissed, leaving him utterly isolated. It was during this period that he delivered his famous, mournful declaration that this was the parting of the ways, heartbroken and seeing no future for himself or his community. In the Gandhian Congress, Jinnah retreated. He packed his bags, left India, and moved to London, establishing a successful legal practice before the Privy Council, seemingly entering a permanent, self-imposed exile from the political battles of his homeland. For several years, Jinnah remained in London, a distant, disillusioned observer of Indian politics, but the subcontinent would not let him go. While he focused on his legal practice, the political situation for Muslims in India was deteriorating. The Muslim League, the organization he had once presided over, had fractured and become politically dormant, a collection of squabbling, powerless factions. In his absence, Muslim political interests lacked a coherent, powerful voice at the national level. It was in this void that prominent Muslim leaders began to see their only hope. In the return of the exiled barrister, figures like Liaquat Ali Khan, who would become his most trusted lieutenant, and the poet-philosopher Allama Iqbal, who had already articulated the two-nation theory, began a persistent campaign of persuasion. They sent letters, they made visits, they implored Jinnah to return, arguing that he, and only he, possessed the stature, the intellect, the incorruptible reputation, and the unblemished record to unite the fragmented Muslim community. In 1934, persuaded that duty called, Jinnah returned to India. He did not return as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. He returned with a new, singular purpose: to take control of the dormant, moribund Muslim League and forge it into a powerful, disciplined, and unified political machine. He intended to rebuild it from the ground up, transforming it into a third force in Indian politics, a body that could stand co-equal with the mighty Indian National Congress and the British Raj, ensuring that the Muslim voice could no longer be ignored. Jinnah's initial efforts to revitalize the Muslim League were met with a crushing setback. He poured his energy into organizing the party for the 1937 provincial elections, the first real test of democratic power under the Government of India Act of 1935. The results were nothing short of a disaster for the League. It was rooted, failing to win a majority in any of the Muslim-majority provinces, like Punjab and Bengal, where regional, secular, or cross-communal parties held sway. The Indian National Congress, by contrast, achieved a spectacular victory. sweeping the polls and winning overwhelming majorities in most of the country. This electoral triumph presented a critical fork in the road. Jinnah, pragmatic even in defeat, proposed coalition governments, particularly in provinces like the United Provinces (UP), where there was a significant Muslim population. Congress, however, high on its victory and feeling politically invincible, refused. Their terms for power sharing were tantamount to political suicide for the League. Dissolve your parliamentary party, merge with Congress, and accept their platform. This perceived arrogance, this winner-take-all attitude from Congress, was the final, definitive betrayal for Jinnah. He interpreted it as irrefutable proof that in a united India governed by a Congress-dominated majority rule, Muslims would be permanently shut out of power, reduced to a politically irrelevant minority. The 2 years of Congress rule that followed, from 1937 to 1939, only hardened this belief. The League compiled lists of alleged atrocities and cultural slights, such as the promotion of the Hindi language and the singing of the song Vande Mataram, with its Hindu-centric imagery in schools, which were interpreted as a systematic campaign to submerge Muslim culture. This perceived betrayal was the catalyst. It convinced Jinnah, and he in turn would convince his followers, that parliamentary democracy in a united India was a sham. He concluded that Hindus and Muslims were not just two communities, they were, in fact, two distinct nations, fundamentally incapable of coexisting within a single state. The conceptual leap made after the 1937 elections found its voice 3 years later, in March 1940. Jinnah, now firmly in command of a rapidly strengthening Muslim League and increasingly referred to as the Quaid-e-Azam, or Great Leader, convened the League's annual session in the city of Lahore. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a new sense of purpose and grievance. It was here, at Minto Park, that the League passed a resolution that would forever alter the destiny of South Asia, known as the Lahore Resolution and later as the Pakistan Resolution. It was the formal articulation of the two-nation theory. The resolution was on the surface strategically vague, demanding that geographically contiguous units, where Muslims were in the majority, specifically in the northwestern and eastern zones of India, should be grouped to constitute independent states in which the constituent units shall be autonomous and sovereign. The plural states was a source of later ambiguity. Was this a call for one state or two? But the message to Congress and the British was clear. The Muslim League was no longer seeking safeguards, separate electorates, or provincial autonomy within a united India. The demand from this point forward was for a separate homeland, a sovereign territory carved from the body of British India. The Lahore Resolution was the political point of no return. The Pakistan idea, once a poet's dream or a fringe theory, was now the official, non-negotiable, and electrifying goal of the All India Muslim League, and Jinnah was its uncompromising architect. The final, turbulent decade of the British Raj was not just a struggle for independence. It was a high-stakes, triangular political battle, a clash of ideologies embodied by three colossal and starkly different personalities. On one side was Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam. He was the immaculate constitutionalist, a man who believed in law, logic, and the power of the veto. He was aloof, formal, intensely private, and strategically brilliant, using his perceived inflexibility as his greatest weapon. He was, in essence, a master political chess player. His primary opponent was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the Mahatma. Gandhi was the spiritual populist, a man who drew his power not from constitutional precedent, but from the hearts of the masses. He operated on a plane of morality and satyagraha, using fasts, marches, and a carefully constructed image of asceticism to mobilize millions. To Jinnah, Gandhi's methods were baffling and infuriating, a chaotic Hindu mysticism masquerading as politics. The third figure in this trinity was Jawaharlal Nehru, Gandhi's anointed heir and the face of secular socialism. Nehru was an idealist, a romantic, an intellectual educated at Harrow and Cambridge, who envisioned a modern, industrial, and pluralistic India. He possessed a personal charisma that rivaled Gandhi's, but directed it toward a different, more state-centric vision. The tragedy of India's partition lies in the profound incompatibility of these three men, their personal animosity, their mutual misunderstandings, and their fundamental disagreements on the very nature of the state. Jinnah's legalism, Gandhi's spiritualism, and Nehru's socialism created a political gridlock. Their collective inability to find, or perhaps even truly seek, common ground in those final, frantic years would seal India's fate, paving the way for a division none of them, at the outset, had truly desired. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 provided Jinnah with the political vacuum he needed to execute his most brilliant strategic maneuver. When the British Viceroy, Lord Linlithgow, declared war on Germany on India's behalf without consulting a single Indian leader, the Indian National Congress was outraged. They demanded immediate independence as a precondition for supporting the war effort. When the British refused, Congress responded in 1942 with the Quit India movement, a massive, leader-led campaign of civil disobedience demanding the British leave immediately. The British response was swift and brutal. The entire Congress leadership, from Gandhi and Nehru down to local organizers, was arrested and imprisoned, effectively decapitating the movement and leaving Congress politically voiceless for the crucial next 3 years. Jinnah, in a masterstroke of political pragmatism, did the exact opposite. He refused to endorse the Quit India movement, which he privately condemned as an attempt to blackmail the British and subjugate the Muslims. Instead, Jinnah and the Muslim League chose a path of tactical, conditional cooperation with the British. While not actively fighting for the British, they did not obstruct the war effort. This neutrality allowed the League to operate freely to consolidate its power in the provinces, especially Punjab and Bengal, crucial to the war effort, and to present itself to the beleaguered British as the only stable, reliable, and representative political entity in India. By the time Congress leaders were released from prison in 1945, the political landscape had been transformed. Jinnah, the man who couldn't win an election in 1937, now held an effective veto over any future constitutional arrangement. He had played a patient, strategic game and had, in the absence of his rivals, made the Muslim League and himself indispensable. By 1946, Great Britain was exhausted, bankrupted by war, and desperate to disentangle itself from its Indian empire. In a final, desperate attempt to avoid a civil war and a partition they did not want, the Labour government of Clement Attlee dispatched a high-powered cabinet mission to Delhi. Their proposal, known as the Cabinet Mission Plan, was a masterpiece of constitutional complexity. It proposed a three-tiered united India, an intricate federal structure designed to appease all sides. At the top was a weak central government, responsible only for defense, foreign affairs, and communications. Below this, the provinces would be grouped into 3 autonomous blocks. Group A, the Hindu-majority provinces. Group B, the Muslim-majority provinces in the northwest like Punjab and Sindh, and Group C, the Muslim-majority provinces in the northeast, Bengal and Assam. Each group would have its own legislature and executive, and provinces would have the right to opt out of a group after a period. It was a plan for a loose, decentralized confederation. To the astonishment of many, Jinnah, the unyielding advocate for a separate Pakistan, accepted it. This surprising move has led to decades of historical debate. Was he using Pakistan as a bargaining chip all along, with this plan giving him the powerful, autonomous Muslim bloc he really wanted? Or did he see it as a stepping stone to an eventual, larger Pakistan? Whatever his motive, the dream of a united India briefly flickered back to life. But it was Congress, specifically Jawaharlal Nehru, who extinguished it. In a famously disastrous press conference, in July 1946, Nehru declared that Congress was not truly bound by the details of the plan, particularly the provincial groupings, and that the future Constituent Assembly would be sovereign and could modify the plan as it saw fit. For Jinnah, this was the ultimate proof of Congress' untrustworthiness. He immediately rescinded the League's acceptance, declared the negotiations a failure, and concluded that the time for constitutional compromise was over. This failure, this what if of history, was the final nail in the coffin for a united India. The collapse of the Cabinet Mission Plan pushed Jinnah into his most dangerous gamble. Frustrated by the political stalemate and convinced that Congress would only respond to force, he announced that the Muslim League would abandon constitutional methods and take its cause to the streets. He called for a direct action day, to be observed on August 16, 1946, a day of protest and meetings to demonstrate the strength of Muslim resolve and to underscore the demand for Pakistan. Jinnah chillingly declared, "We have bid goodbye to constitutional methods," and warned, "We shall have India divided or India destroyed." What was intended, perhaps, as a massive political protest, a show of force, descended into an unimaginable horror in the city of Calcutta. The League-controlled government of Bengal declared August 16th a public holiday, but in the combustible atmosphere of the city, protest rapidly spiraled into organized communal slaughter. For 3 days, the city became a war zone. Armed gangs of Hindus and Muslims, fueled by rumor and fanaticism, butchered each other with knives, clubs, and iron bars. The Great Calcutta Killing, as it became known, left an estimated 4,000 people dead and tens of thousands injured. The gutters ran red, and the Hooghly River was clogged with corpses. The violence was not contained. It sparked an immediate and terrifying chain reaction of reprisal massacres in Noakhali, Bihar, and deep into the rural heartlands of Punjab. This was the point where the communal tinderbox was well and truly lit, proving that the violence was not an isolated event, but a symptom of a deeply fractured society. The political argument for partition was now over. The Great Calcutta Killing had provided a gruesome, bloody proof that Hindus and Muslims could no longer coexist. Partition, which had been a political demand, now seemed to an increasingly terrified populace and a horrified British administration to be the only and inevitable alternative to a full-scale, uncontrollable civil war. Into this inferno of escalating violence and political breakdown stepped the last Viceroy of India, Lord Louis Mountbatten, a charismatic war hero with royal blood. He arrived in March 1947 with a seemingly impossible mandate from Prime Minister Clement Attlee: transfer power to Indian hands and get Britain out, preferably by June 1948. But Mountbatten, assessing the rapidly collapsing situation and the sheer hatred that had poisoned the negotiations, made a fateful, unilateral decision. He concluded that the original timeline was far too slow, the country was a powder keg, and he was sitting on the detonator. He declared that he would accelerate the entire timeline for independence, moving the date up by 10 months to August 1947. This Operation Scurry, as his frantic plan was known, gave everyone, the British, the new governments, and the panicked populace mere weeks to prepare for the single greatest political change in modern history. The most catastrophic consequence of this haste was the division of the provinces of Punjab and Bengal. To draw the new border, the Radcliffe Line, the British appointed Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a London lawyer who, in a detail that would be absurd if it weren't so tragic, had never been to India before, knew nothing of its geography, and had no understanding of the complex tapestry of Sikh, Muslim, and Hindu communities he was about to vivisect. He was given just 5 weeks, in the sweltering heat of an Indian summer, to draw a line on a map that would divide villages, sever irrigation canals, split families, and decide the fate of millions. The task was so toxic, and the timeline so insane that Radcliffe himself, fearing for his life, collected his fee, burned all his papers, and fled the country before his own border was even officially announced. The accelerated timeline culminated into frantic days of celebration and terror. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan was born, with Jinnah addressing its new constituent assembly in Karachi. On August 15, 1947, India followed, with Jawaharlal Nehru delivering his poetic tryst with destiny speech in a tumultuous Delhi. But for the millions in Punjab and Bengal, the celebration was drowned out by the sound of violence and the frantic rush of displacement. The final border, the Radcliffe Line, was not even published until 2 days after independence, leaving millions in a state of terrifying uncertainty, waking up to discover they were now on the wrong side of a new arbitrary and hostile international border. What followed was not a migration, it was an apocalypse. It was the largest and most rapid forced migration in human history. In a desperate, panicked exodus, an estimated 14 to 15 million people, Muslims fleeing west and east to Pakistan, Hindus and Sikhs fleeing east to India, left their ancestral homes. They traveled on foot, in bullock carts, and on Anadok ghost trains that would often arrive at their destinations packed not with living passengers, but with the silent, mutilated corpses of those murdered en route. The communal violence that erupted, particularly in the divided Punjab, was of a medieval ferocity, a frenzy of mass slaughter, abduction, and systematic rape used as a tool of ethnic cleansing. The estimates of the dead vary wildly, from a conservative to 100,000 to a horrifying to million people. This was the price of independence. The British Raj did not end with a peaceful transfer of power. It ended in a bloodbath of unimaginable proportions, a human catastrophe that would permanently scar the psyche of two nations. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, now the Quaid-e-Azam, became Pakistan's first Governor-General, the absolute center of power in the new nation he had willed into existence. He had achieved his impossible goal, but the state he inherited was, in his own earlier words, a moth-eaten and truncated version of the Pakistan he had demanded, having been denied the rich prize of Calcutta and the full undivided provinces of Punjab and Bengal. He arrived in Karachi, the new, chaotic capital, to face a task that was not just difficult, but fundamentally impossible. Pakistan was born in a state of administrative and economic collapse. It had no organized government, files were famously left behind in Delhi, and civil servants conducted state business from packing crates on the sidewalk. It had no money. India, in the chaos and acrimony of partition, delayed the transfer of Pakistan's share of the central bank's assets, leaving the new government unable to pay its own employees. The division of the British Indian Army was chaotic and violent, and the new nation lacked a coherent central bank or industrial base. And worst of all, it was immediately overwhelmed by millions of desperate, starving, and homeless refugees, muhajirs, who had lost everything in the partition violence and now looked to their new homeland for salvation. Jinnah, the master constitutionalist, was now forced to become the chief administrator of a nascent state that was, in effect, the world's largest and most under-resourced refugee camp. He worked himself to the bone, pouring his last reserves of energy into holding the fragile nation together, a nation absurdly split into two wings, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, separated by over 1,000 miles of hostile Indian territory. In the midst of this monumental, chaotic task of nation building, Jinnah delivered the most important, and subsequently most debated, speech of his entire life. On August 11, 1947, addressing the new Constituent Assembly of Pakistan, the leader who had just founded a nation, explicitly in the name of Islam, stood and delivered a message that was, by any measure, shockingly secular. "You are free," he declared to the assembly. "You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in the state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed that has nothing to do with the business of the state." He went on to say that, in time, Hindus would cease to be Hindus and Muslims would cease to be Muslims, not in the religious sense, because that is the personal faith of each individual, but in the political sense as citizens of the state. This speech remains the central, unresolved enigma of Jinnah's legacy and Pakistan's identity. What did he mean? Was this a genuine, heartfelt return to the secular, pluralistic ideals of his youth, now that the political goal of partition was achieved? Was it a pragmatic attempt to reassure the millions of Hindus, Sikhs, and Christians remaining in Pakistan that they would not be persecuted? Or was it, as his Islamist critics would later claim, a momentary lapse, a speech taken out of context that did not reflect the true Islamic-based ideology of the Pakistan movement? To this day, secularists in Pakistan hold this speech up as Jinnah's true, unfulfilled vision for the nation, while religious conservatives often seek to minimize or reinterpret it. It is a profound contradiction, a state created for Muslims, whose founder immediately declared that religion had nothing to do with the business of the state. 16. The crushing, impossible burden of building a nation from scratch, of managing a refugee crisis, and of governing a state on the brink of collapse, took its final, fatal toll. Jinnah was already a sick man. He was suffering from advanced tuberculosis, a fact he had meticulously concealed from everyone for years, most critically, from the British. It is one of history's most compelling counterfactuals. Many, including Lord Mountbatten, later claimed that if they had known Jinnah was dying, they would have simply stalled negotiations, waited him out, and partition might never have happened. But he guarded his secret as closely as his political strategy. Exhausted, frail, and increasingly isolated, he retreated to the cool mountain air of Zerat. In Balochistan, as his health failed, his final days were a quiet tragedy. On September 11, 1948, just over 1 year after Pakistan's birth, he was flown back to Karachi. The ambulance sent to collect him from the airport ran out of fuel and broke down on the road, leaving the dying founder of the nation stranded in the suffocating heat for over an hour. He died later that night. Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam, left behind a new nation, a testament to his unbreakable will and political genius. But he also left behind an unsettled and profoundly painful legacy. In Pakistan, he is revered as the father of the nation, a figure beyond reproach. In India, he is often cast as the arch-villain who tore the subcontinent apart. In history, he remains a complex, brilliant, arrogant, and ultimately tragic figure and architect of a destiny so vast and so bloody that its consequences and the questions it raises about faith, identity, and power continue to define South Asia to this very day.